The bus lurched to a stop outside Fort Benning, Georgia, and Maya Chen stepped onto the asphalt with her single duffel bag slung over one shoulder. At 5'3" and barely 110 pounds, she looked more like she belonged in a college library than a military training facility. The other recruits towered over her as they filed off the bus, their voices already booming with nervous bravado and crude jokes about what lay ahead. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez stood waiting, his weathered face scanning the group with practiced disdain. His eyes lingered on Maya for a moment longer than the others, and she caught the slight shake of his head. Great. Already written off before she even opened her mouth. The Georgia heat pressed down like a wet blanket as they formed their ragged line. Maya found herself squeezed between two massive guys who looked like they had been lifting weights since middle school. The one on her left, Thompson according to his name tape, glanced down at her and snorted. He said something to his buddy about how the army was really scraping the bottom of the barrel these days. His friend laughed and agreed that she would probably wash out before the end of the first week. The barracks smelled like industrial disinfectant and fierce sweat. Maya claimed a bottom bunk in the corner, hoping to stay invisible, but Thompson had other plans. He dropped his gear on the bunk above hers with unnecessary force, making the metal frame rattle. "Look what we have here," he announced loudly. "Our very own mascot. Think they make BDUs in extra small?" His buddies gathered around, grinning like hyenas. Maya kept her head down, methodically arranging her few belongings in the metal locker. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, his voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. "Listen up, maggots. Tomorrow morning, 0600 hours, you belong to me. Some of you think this is summer camp. Some of you think mommy and daddy's money will save you here." His eyes found Maya again. "And some of you are just plain delusional about what it takes to be a soldier." The other recruits shifted nervously, but Maya felt something different stirring in her chest. Not fear, but a familiar calm that settled over her like an old friend. She had heard worse from better men than this. "Hey everyone, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop a comment and let's see how global our community really is tonight." The alarm shrieked at 0530, and chaos erupted in the barracks. Maya was already awake, had been for 20 minutes, but she stayed still until the others began stumbling around in the dark. Thompson crashed into his locker, cursing loudly as boots and gear scattered across the floor. Maya slipped out of her bunk and began dressing with quiet efficiency. Her movements were precise, economical, each piece of her uniform falling into place without wasted motion. She had her boots laced and bed made before most of the others had found their socks. Rodriguez burst through the door like an explosion. 2 minutes, ladies. 2 minutes to get your sorry buts outside information, or you will learn what real pain feels like." The scramble intensified, grown men hopping on one foot trying to pull on boots. Thompson glared at Maya as she stood calmly beside her perfectly made bunk. "Show off," he muttered. "Trying to make the rest of us look bad already." Outside in the pre-dawn darkness, they formed their crooked lines on the parade ground. Maya took her position without fanfare, spine straight, eyes forward. Rodriguez walked the formation, stopping to berate recruits whose uniforms were disheveled or whose posture failed to meet his standards. When he reached Maya, he paused. The obstacle course stretched before them like a medieval torture device. Rope climbs, wall scaling, mud crawls, and tire runs designed to break spirits and separate the strong from the weak. Rodriguez stood at the starting line, stopwatch in hand, his expression promising misery for anyone who disappointed him. Thompson and his crew flexed and postured, discussing their high school football glory days and how easy this would be. Maya stood quietly at the back of the group, ignoring their increasingly crude comments about her chances of completing even the first obstacle. When Rodriguez called her name, several recruits actually laughed out loud. One of them made a joke about needing a stepladder for the wall climb. Another suggested they should time her with a calendar instead of a stopwatch. Rodriguez himself seemed skeptical as he looked down at her. "Chen," he said, his voice carrying across the training ground. You sure you are in the right place? The Air Force recruiting station is just down the road. Maybe they have something more your speed. The words hung in the humid Georgia air like a challenge. Maya felt that familiar stillness settle over her again, the same calm that had carried her through situations these weekend warriors could never imagine. She stepped up to the starting line and waited for the whistle, her face revealing nothing. The whistle screamed and Maya exploded forward like a coiled spring suddenly released. Her legs pumped with mechanical precision as she hit the first obstacle, a series of low barriers that most recruits awkwardly hurdled over. Maya flowed over them like water, each movement economical and perfectly timed. Behind her, she could hear Thompson and the others scrambling to keep up, their heavy breathing and cursing growing louder as they realized she was not the easy target they had assumed. Rodriguez stood with his stopwatch, his expression shifting from bored dismissal to genuine surprise. The rope climb loomed ahead, 20 feet of thick hemp that had already defeated 2 larger recruits who now sat gasping in the dirt. Maya hit it without slowing, her hands finding purchase with practiced ease. She moved up the rope with a fluid rhythm that spoke of countless hours of training, muscles working in perfect coordination. From below, she heard one recruit whisper to another about how she climbed like she had been doing it her whole life. Thompson shouted something about beginner's luck, but his voice carried less conviction than before. Have you ever seen someone completely surprise everyone with hidden talents they never expected? Share your story in the comments below. Maya dropped from the rope and landed in a perfect combat crouch, barely breathing hard while the other recruits were still struggling halfway up. She moved to the wall traverse like she was running through a familiar neighborhood, her hands finding holds that others missed entirely. Rodriguez found himself actually leaning forward, his stopwatch forgotten as he watched this small woman navigate obstacles that had broken men twice her size. The mud crawl that had reduced Thompson to a cursing, flailing mess became something Maya seemed to glide through, emerging clean while others looked like they had wrestled alligators. The tire run should have been her downfall. The massive truck tires were spaced for longer legs, designed to challenge the biggest, strongest recruits. Maya approached them differently, using technique instead of brute force, her timing so precise that she seemed to dance between them rather than fight through them. A hush had fallen over the training ground. Even the recruits who had finished their runs early stopped their recovery stretches to watch. Rodriguez glanced at his stopwatch and blinked twice, certain he had misread the numbers. What would you do in Maya's situation? Would you hold back to avoid standing out, or would you show them what you are really capable of? Let us know in the comments. Maya crossed the finish line with the best time Rodriguez had seen in 15 years of training recruits. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of her controlled breathing and the distant hum of military vehicles on the main road. Thompson staggered across the line nearly 3 minutes later, his face red and streaked with mud, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. The other recruits filtered in behind him, all of them stealing glances at the small woman who had just redefined their understanding of what was possible. Rodriguez approached Maya with slow, deliberate steps, his drill sergeant mask slipping slightly to reveal genuine curiosity beneath. "Chen," he said quietly, "where exactly did you train before coming here?" His voice carried none of its usual bite, replaced by something that sounded almost like respect. Maya straightened to attention, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere over his shoulder. Standard fitness regimen, drill sergeant. Nothing special. But there was something in her voice, a controlled precision that suggested layers of training and experience far beyond what any civilian should possess. The afternoon sun beat down on the training ground as a convoy of black SUVs appeared in the distance, heading toward the command building. This is getting intense. Are you feeling the tension building? Drop a comment about what you think is coming next. The convoy pulled up to the training ground just as Rodriguez was dismissing the stunned recruits. 3 black SUVs with government plates and tinted windows that reflected the Georgia sun like dark mirrors. Maya felt a familiar chill run down her spine, the same sensation she had learned to trust in places where knowing the difference between friend and enemy meant the difference between life and death. A figure emerged from the lead vehicle, and even from a distance, his bearing commanded immediate attention. General Marcus Stone, 3 stars gleaming on his collar, moved with the controlled power of a man who had spent decades making life and death decisions. His gray hair was cropped military short, and his eyes swept the training ground with the practiced assessment of a career soldier. Rodriguez snapped to attention so fast Maya thought he might give himself whiplash. The other recruits scrambled into formation, their earlier exhaustion forgotten in the presence of such high-ranking authority. Thompson tried to straighten his mud-stained uniform while shooting nervous glances at his buddies. General Stone approached their ragged line with measured steps, his gaze moving from face to face with clinical precision. Maya kept her eyes forward, but she could feel his attention settling on her like a weight. General Stone moved down the line like a predator evaluating prey, stopping briefly to examine each recruit. His questions were sharp and pointed, designed to cut through nervous stammering and reveal character. Thompson nearly hyperventilated when asked about his motivation for joining the army. When the general reached Maya, something shifted in the air around them. He studied her face with the intensity of a man trying to solve a complex puzzle, his weathered features betraying the slightest hint of recognition. Maya maintained her rigid posture, but she could feel her pulse quickening despite her training. The Georgia heat had forced most recruits to roll up their sleeves during the obstacle course, and Maya was no exception. As General Stone's gaze traveled down her arm, his eyes suddenly locked onto something just below her left elbow. The small black tattoo that she usually kept hidden beneath long sleeves. His entire demeanor changed in an instant. The clinical assessment disappeared, replaced by something that looked almost like shock. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper as he leaned in to get a better look at the intricate design. The other recruits noticed the sudden change in atmosphere, sensing that something significant was happening but unable to understand what they were witnessing. General Stone's voice cut through the humid air like a blade. "That tattoo. Where did you get that tattoo, soldier?" His words carried a weight that made every recruit on the line hold their breath. Rodriguez stepped forward, confusion written across his weathered face, but the general raised a hand to stop him. Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She had hoped to keep this buried, to start fresh without the shadow of her past following her into this new chapter. But there was no hiding from those 3 stars and the recognition burning in the general's eyes. "Unit 7749, sir," she replied quietly, her voice steady despite the storm building around them. The numbers fell into the silence like stones into still water, creating ripples that spread across the entire training ground. Rodriguez went pale. Thompson's mouth fell open as he looked between Maya and the general, finally understanding that he had been taunting someone far beyond his comprehension. The other recruits shifted nervously, sensing the electricity crackling through the air without fully grasping its source. General Stone straightened to his full height, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the respect reserved for warriors who had earned it in blood and sacrifice. "This changes everything, doesn't it? Share this moment with someone who needs to see it tonight." The silence stretched like a taut wire until General Stone broke it with 4 words that changed everything. "Show me your skills." It was not a request but a command that carried the weight of decades in uniform and battles fought in places that did not exist on any official map. Maya stepped forward, her entire bearing transforming in an instant. The hesitant recruit disappeared, replaced by someone who moved with lethal precision and absolute confidence. She scanned the training ground with professional eyes, noting sight lines, cover positions, and tactical advantages that the other recruits had never even considered. Rodriguez found his voice first. "Sir, with all due respect, what exactly is Unit 7749? But General Stone's attention remained fixed on Maya as she approached the weapons rack with movements that spoke of countless hours of specialized training. She selected an M4 carbine and performed a function check so smooth and automatic that it looked like a dance. Her hands moved without conscious thought, muscle memory taking over as she cleared, loaded, and shouldered the weapon with textbook perfection. Thompson and his crew watched in stunned silence as the woman they had mocked prepared to demonstrate skills that most soldiers spent years trying to master. Who else is watching this thinking everything they assumed was completely wrong? Drop your thoughts below. Maya moved to the firing line with fluid grace, her weapon positioned with the precision of someone who had depended on such skills for survival. The target stood 200 meters downrange, distances that challenged even experienced marksmen. She settled into a shooting stance that spoke of training far beyond basic military instruction. The first shot rang out across the Georgia countryside, followed immediately by 4 more in rapid succession. Through the spotting scope, Rodriguez watched in disbelief as 5 perfect holes appeared in the target's center mass, clustered so tightly they could be covered by a quarter. Thompson stared at the target, then back at Maya, his face cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and dawning respect. The woman he had dismissed as weak had just demonstrated shooting skills that surpassed anything he had ever witnessed. General Stone nodded with satisfaction, his expression carrying the weight of shared secrets and battles fought in shadow. Unit 7749 was a ghost unit, he explained to the assembled group. Deep reconnaissance, counterterrorism, operations that never happened in places that do not exist on maps. Only the best of the best earned that tattoo. Maya lowered her weapon and faced her fellow recruits, seeing respect replace mockery in their eyes. The transformation was complete. Never underestimate anyone. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that tonight.